I can give actual examples. Take, say, the United States. If you go back to 1962, at the time of the missile crisis, we know the details now. The records have come out. There was a point in the missile crisis where Kennedy could have ended it, and he knew it. He could have ended it by accepting an offer from Khrushchev, which he recognized was reasonable, but he refused to. He wanted to show how powerful he could be and insult the Russians. And he decided to face a risk, which he estimated at about 1/3 of nuclear war, which would have destroyed the Northern Hemisphere, just in order to show how macho he was. That's basically what happened. So powerful states can act irrationally. Well, Israel isn't the United States, but it could act irrationally in ways that are much more dangerous than humiliating the Turkish ambassador, or say not letting me come in, which is insignificant. There isn't any rational basis for it. Just like there's no rational basis for the threats against Iran. I mean, Iran has a terrible government that will kind of rotten things, but there are other governments that are worse, and they're not a serious threat, except the threat of deterrence. They're a threat of deterrence and expanding their influence. And Israel is turning it into what they call an existential threat. It's a threat to our existence. And that could lead to a very irrational act. And I don't have to go into it. You can guess what it might be. But these are some of the dangers in the region. And unless there is a move, and quickly, towards a diplomatic settlement, which is feasible, the region could become an extremely dangerous place. In fact, a face with, might move to species destruction. You have nuclear war, you're finished.
I think we have time for one more short question.
Yeah. I wanted here to round up actually a few comments that I've already heard with a question. Trying to go back to the global picture, so to speak, and to the interesting and intriguing notion of the proximity talks between the US and the world. Wondering who the moderator of these talks would be.
Do you want to volunteer?
Wondering about that, I would put two questions really. The first is, so how do you push the United States to take the position that is needed to start up with ending this Palestinian-Israeli conflict? And how would you ensure the rational political action of an irrational government where, for example, while trying to expand, Israel is actually ghettoizing the Palestinians on the one hand, but actually if you have a look at the settlements, Israel is creating Jewish ghettos within the Palestinian Jewish community living on this territory. It sounds very irrational, as a matter of fact, and there's a need to eventually push the Israelis to stop this ghettoization process, the Americans to stop supporting this process. And the real question would be, what do you think the starting point would be? How do you mobilize? What's your suggestion on mobilizing the world to make probably the populace the moderator of these proximity talks?
Understood. Yeah. Well, let's take the South African example again. And what induced the United States to change its policy and to permit apartheid to collapse? Well, we actually don't have diplomatic records. They have not been released. But you can tell pretty well. For one thing, there was just very strong public opinion calling for an end to apartheid. In the United States as well, as I mentioned, Congress was passing sanctions against South Africa, which Reagan had to evade. American corporations were leaving South Africa, they were opposed to apartheid. It wasn't good for their business. Not that they were nice people or anything, just not good. The world opinion was just overwhelmingly opposed to apartheid. And it finally had an impact, and we decided in Washington that it would be better to make a transition in which you eliminate apartheid, but essentially keep the same economic structure. So the same people are rich. Now there are a couple of black faces in the limousines, but the poor are maybe worse off than before, but you get rid of apartheid. And they made that decision, and it happened. And there are other cases like it. Take one more example, which is more recent. For 25 years, the United States and Britain primarily, but other powers, Western powers too, supported an Indonesian invasion of a former Portuguese colony, East Timor, which is one of the worst atrocities of the modern world. It was virtually genocidal. They wiped out maybe a quarter of the population. But as long as the U.S. continued to support it, it went on. And the press wouldn't report it, and Europe backed it, and so on. Well, in September 1999, we can pick the date. In September 1999, domestic pressure in the United States, mostly from the Catholic Church, it was a Catholic colony, but conservative pressure in the United States, small popular movement, and international protests convinced Clinton that it should be over. Well, up until that day, the Indonesian military, which ran the state, was stating, we'll never leave. This is an Indonesian province. We own it. We're never going to leave. Clinton made a short, quiet statement at an international conference in which he said, the game is over. The next day, the Indonesian forces left. That's the way the world works. How do you get to this point? Well, it depends where you are. If you're in Europe, for example, Europeans don't have to act like puppy dogs who follow along whatever the master says. They don't have to do that. They have choices. They have options. They can become more independent, and they can become a powerful pressure on the United States. And of course, this region is very significant for them, for all kind of reasons. So they could do something. Inside the United States, yes, that's where it really matters. There's plenty of people doing things. That's what all the activism is about. Here, there are things you can do too. The positions that are taken by the population in the region and by the Arab states can help shape conditions in which the U.S. leadership will recognize that it's in their interest to join the world. You're right in pointing out that the phrase proximity talks doesn't mean anything literally. You don't have talks between the United States and the world. What happens is the United States has to make a decision, the U.S. government has to make a decision to go along with the world. And if it does, as in the cases that I mentioned, things change. And things that happen in the world have an effect on how those decisions are made. And depending on where you are, there are things you can do to help create the conditions in which those changes will take place.
Thank you very much. On behalf of Birzeit University students, faculty, staff, and administration, I would like to thank you very much for taking the effort to make your speech to the Birzeit University community and to Palestinians at large. We do hope that this would be one in a series, eventually, of debates, discussions, and lectures oriented towards decolonizing the world. Thank you.